Hi. I was the founding principal of the Frederick School and was there for 7 years and have just shifted into a new role working with the mayor and the district on providing technology to families in their homes. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it was like to have a school that really embraced the idea of 21st century teaching and learning. So at first I should tell you I've been an educator for about 30 years, a little more than that. And I've seen a lot of trends and fads come and go. Those of you who have been in education for a while know that. I have only allowed myself to be guided by common sense and by my passion for children and ensuring equity. And so for me, the integration of technology and 21st century skills was a no-brainer. It makes sense. A lot of people asked why I worked so hard to get so many resources available at the Frederick. And I did so because the children at the Frederick in the Grove Hall section of Dorchester could not compete with more affluent peers unless they had those resources. And I look at it this way. If you have a race car driver and you give him a fabulous race car and let him practice on the track a whole lot, and you have another race car driver and you give him a jalopy, but you don't let him drive it till he gets to the race, you know what's going to happen in that race. And then we tell the driver of the jalopy that he's underperforming. We need to be more careful about providing equitable resources if we want equitable outcomes. So that was a huge issue for me and one that I am very passionate about. So with the help of then State Rep Marie St. Fleur and the Boston Public Schools and a very supportive community, my school was able to provide every child with a laptop. And they had them all day. They couldn't take them home because it wasn't safe for them to walk through the streets with a backpack, with a laptop. So we had other ways of getting technology into their homes. But we believed, and I still believe, that technology just ought to be a line item, like textbooks, and that every child should have one. As we planned for the rollout, we always said technology is not the goal. Technology is the tool that gets us to the goal. And we included teachers, community members, partners, families, students. Everybody was involved in the process of preparing and rolling out the laptops. We asked folks to help us think about what are our goals? What do we want the end results to be? And along with the more traditional outcomes of academic achievement in the stated content areas, we really wanted to increase the students' organization, collaboration, innovation, and communication. And in particular, if you've ever worked with middle school students, and we had 650 of them, you know how important organization can be. We didn't just have goals for kids, though. We had goals for students, for parents, for community members, for teachers, and for administrators. We all had goals to reach in order to bring our vision of what this should look like to fruition. We had really incredibly talented teachers and really willing teachers. And so we did, as was suggested earlier, we found the folks with lots of energy and a real interest and a real passion, and we nurtured them. And we put them in charge. And we said, you show us how to do it. And interestingly enough, they pushed way harder than I ever would have. And we moved much faster than I would have assumed was possible because they were in charge. My favorite PD, we did lots of it, but we did it all internal. We grew our own, that always throws me when somebody holds it again. We grew our own internal experts because you know what it's like when you have fly-by PD, right? Somebody comes in, teaches something, and they're gone. You have a question, you have no way to learn. You have no way to continue to learn your learning on that topic. So we made our own internal experts so we could go and work with our experts internally. So I'll say one more thing and leave the rest out because I know you're going to say I'm done. So finally, in my mind, teaching 21st century skills does not replace the teaching of traditional content. It's not an add-on, it's an instead of. So we're teaching in a new way. We are not teaching content. I regularly told folks who came to visit the Frederick, technology is not what we teach, it's how we teach.
I think I come today from the perspective of a suburban superintendent in a couple communities, and the fact that I certainly acknowledge the needs of urban settings to connect the disparities that are there. I have never worked in an urban setting, and I think I don't have that perspective, but looking at the suburban piece, we have a crisis as well. We heard it spoken about that we aren't really making the gains that we need to. Why aren't we producing the engineers and the scientists that we in fact need to? I think it's because our kids are walking into museums, and we really aren't looking at a student-centered environment as successfully as we could. We look at the various, over the past 20 years, comprehensive school reform efforts. None of them have really had success. And I was fortunate to have been a system-wide teacher. I was a music teacher, so I saw progression from K through 12. I also was very fortunate to be part of an NEA initiative called the Learning Labs back in the 90s. Had started with the Mastery Schools in the 80s, went to the Learning Labs, and then went to the Coalition of District Excellence. And in Neshoba, we were the Learning Lab for the state of Massachusetts. And that group of 29 school districts across the country came down to look at systemic thinking through a process of the Baldrige criteria, which is a process of the National Institute for Standards in Washington. And it were those ideas that shaped the things that we did in Pentucket. And I just want to sort of bullet point those things and then certainly open for questions later on. The first thing we did 5 years ago was establish time for people to collaborate. We took our professional development time and worked it into a regular, ongoing, job-embedded, which is certainly the research base, saying that teachers need time to collaborate. Because I'm not sure in suburbans we need more time. I think we need better time. We then created a very simple question that said, in reflecting back on your life, what attributes of a learning experience were powerful for you? And surprisingly enough, we came down to experiential, ownership, reflection, multifaceted support, being outside your comfort zone. All those things were important. That's the classroom environment that must exist. We then defined habits of learning for students, the skills that we're talking about today: collaboration, communication, thinking, creative exploration. Those skills then have to be explicitly taught in balance with content skills. And if they're going to be taught explicitly, they need to be assessed explicitly. And with our many stakeholder groups, we created a district-wide rubric of what it meant to be successful in those areas. And then we gathered teachers together at each of the various grade levels to interpret it into developmentally appropriate language and tasks so that they could be an assessment. We are moving this year into a process of asking grade 4, grade 6, grade 8, and grade 11 to in fact have a demonstration of mastery at the end of the year. However, every student will have a portfolio of habits of learning and will have at least, this is K through 12, pre-K through 12, will actually have 2 exhibited works in that portfolio that will travel with them, assessed against the rubrics for that grade level. So I think the key for Pentucket has been that we looked at a results, data-driven, systemic reform effort, sort of grounded in Baldrige principles. There were 6 states in this country that at one point were Baldrige and education states. Secondly, that we created the time for teams. Bill Hart is an expert on teams, talked about the many ways in which they approach their work, and we used a lot of the work of the National School Reform faculty in terms of the protocols they have of how to have good discussions, because I think teachers have often worked individually instead of the ability to work together in teams. And lastly, the assessment is crucial. So thank you very much.